Welcome to the Midwest Blitz. It's college football comfort food for the Midwest soul. Now, here are your hosts, Coach Drew and Big Nick.
Welcome to another edition of the Midwest Blitz. Now we're at college playoffs round 2.
Yup. College football playoffs round 2 kicks off on New Year's Eve at 7:30 with the Miami Hurricanes plus 9.5 versus the Ohio State Buckeyes, the number 2 team in all the land. Coach Drew, I've heard a lot of things about Miami's performance against Texas A&M on the road, which I was very impressed by. I've heard a lot of things about Ohio State that I didn't think were fair to say, like that, Ohio State should be doubted because they lost to Indiana. People are still thinking about their daddy's Indiana, their older brother's Indiana. That's not the same Indiana. Ohio State was an equal team in that game. They just happened to lose a close contest. I'll say that about the Buckeyes. For the Hurricanes, I was impressed, okay? I want your feedback on this, and I'm going to give you a couple notes about the Hurricanes and their win versus the 12th man and the Texas A&M Aggies. I actually got a letter from a fan of the show. His name is Drew, and he said that Texas A&M shit the bed in this one, Coach Drew. I don't know if you heard anybody say that. Another friend of the show named Drew said that Miami was fool's gold and that really they accomplished nothing by beating the Aggies and the vaunted 12th man in a difficult road environment. Another friend of the show named Drew said that Mario Cristobal was a punk-ass bitch and he ain't ready for the Buckeyes. I'm not sure that this guy is a friend of the show, Coach Drew, or maybe just a hardcore Ohio State fan. But I think that Miami's defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line is the key matchup in this ball game. I always go up front first. That's my inclination as a coach, is that the game is built. Teams are built inside out and then, front to back. You don't start with a good wide receiver, have nobody that blocks for a quarterback, yada, yada, yada. You guys have already heard this. If not, you wouldn't be watching the Midwest Blitz with me and Coach Drew. But my friend of the show, Coach Drew, that hates Miami, friend of the show named Drew that hates Miami, said that Miami really didn't prove that much by winning a defensive slug out on the road at Texas A&M. I wonder what my best friend named Drew has to say about that evaluation. My friend Drew said that Texas A&M kind of shit the bed at home and lost that game. What do you have to say about that, Coach Drew?
Well, if it's the same Drew who also said that Texas A&M was backed up by the 12th man, I mean, hosting a game on with College Game Day, everything going on there, Miami with Carson and Beck came in there. He brought his veteranism in there. He did what he needed to do. It was a close battle. I might be a Texas A&M. I wasn't trying to really support them, but I was really surprised. Miami did prove something, that they can go on the road and win, right? Now playing a neutral site against Ohio State, right? You're correct. Can they win in the trenches is going to be the key to this game. Before Ohio State played Indiana, they had given up 6 total sacks all season. 6. Ohio State gave up 5 to Indiana, almost equivalent to their whole season in one game.
I'm sorry, Coach. Can you say that again for my thirsty ears? How many times did the Hoosiers sack the Buckeyes?
They did it 5 times.
Thanks, Coach Drew. I really appreciate that about you.
So going into this game, they given up a total of 11 sacks. Now you have the man who no one recognized before he put the mask on in Bain, and a Miami-thirsty offensive line who did really well against what many predicted early in the season, Notre Dame to have one of the best offensive lines. That was told by us by a Notre Dame insider, right? But Miami proved very different. So, again, this Miami defense is going to be really good against this Ohio State team. Can Julian, the Prince Super Saiyan, the Prince of Saiyans,
his cape? He wears a cape, Drew. He looks like a character from Game of Thrones, like a main character we haven't met yet. The hair, the cape, all of it. He is the Prince, Coach Drew. Go ahead.
He is
Heisman finalist as a freshman. How do you not like that? Unless you're
He's a
from the
very
team up north.
Yep, and he's a fierce competitor. I mean,
He is.
you're looking at him, some of the questions that I was gonna ask you is, what does Julian Sand do when they get into pressure early into the game? Because that's what's most likely gonna happen, and can Julian Sand, Super Saiyan, have a better performance in the 4th quarter than he did against Indiana when the pressure was on?
Coach Drew, that is a fantastic question. That led me into my next point. So, Coach Drew's question was, what does Sand do when Miami puts pressure on him earlier in the contest? And I promise you, as sure as we're sitting here, Miami will put pressure on Julian Sand early in the contest. So, one thing that Ohio State has going for him, this is no offense to the former wide receiver and former offensive coordinator for Ohio State, is that Ryan Day will be the play caller for this game. I watched the press conference where he announced that, so you didn't have to. But Miami is still going to get pressure on the Prince, Julian Sand, Super Saiyan, whatever you want to call him. They are going to get pressure on him, but I think that Ryan Day is going to do a better job of play calling early in the game to keep pressure off of Sand than the old guy, the old bum who's on his way out the door would do. That's just my opinion. Ryan Day has always been an elite play caller, and Sand will do the same thing under pressure that he's done the entire season, which is be a boss, take care of the football. Obviously, turnovers happen when quarterbacks are under pressure, so that could happen to Julian Sand, but Julian Sand has the mind of a championship level quarterback. He's a freshman. He's not going to lead this team to a championship per se, but he will conduct himself as a champion in helping the elite wide receiver core of Smith, Tate, etc. advance. Should they advance versus Miami Hurricanes, I have a lot of faith in Julian Sand, honestly. All right, CJ Carr is my favorite freshman quarterback this year. Bachmeyer from BYU also, who performed very well in the Pop-Tart Bowl, a bowl that some teams don't want to play in, but I thought the Pop-Tart Bowl was fun. Side note, Georgia Tech versus BYU, a great freshman versus a great senior. But Julian Sand is going to be one of those guys by the time his college eligibility is expired that he will be a guy who is a game runner, not just a game manager, but a guy that can help you win a game. But he doesn't have to do that for the Buckeyes right now. But let's get back, Coach Drew, to the heart of the Midwest Blitz, which is at the interior, at the offensive versus defensive line matchup, which is Miami's defensive line versus the Ohio State Buckeyes. The world famous Buckeyes offensive line will face their greatest challenge of the season here, even greater than the Indiana Hoosiers, who sacked Julian Sand 5 times in the Big Ten championship game. Now, this is interesting to me, Coach Drew, as someone who loves to watch line play, is that Indiana has been the most effective and productive front seven in America at rushing the passer. But it's not from one or two players. It's a team effort. It's honestly like a mystical concept. If you were playing some video game where you got a magic wand and you're like, oh, everybody that plays is productive, that's Indiana. Miami, the Hurricanes, are the exact opposite. There's no mystery. You've got Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, coached by NFL Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. They're playing football martial arts while rushing the passer. But here's the thing I say, Coach Drew, about Miami is that they don't just rush the passer. They play the run game effectively also. And you hardcore football people understand what I'm saying. Some guys just go for QB sacks because they're trying to get stats to go to the league. These guys play the scheme. They play team football. But when they get matched up one-on-one, meaning nobody's chipping them, there's no help, no double team coming off the edge, Bain and Mesidor are capable of crippling your quarterback coming off the edge, sometimes from the middle. This Miami defensive line is scary, and that, I would say, is the main advantage that I see that Miami has against Ohio State is the D-line versus O-line. Now, I will give Ohio State credit for the best wide receiver core in the country, a Heisman finalist quarterback, Coach Drew. I want to say this about the Buckeyes, though. Tigris Shabola, who was, at least in the preseason, supposed to be their best offensive lineman. Tegra Shabola is out for the season on the offensive line with an unfortunate injury. I still think Shabola has an NFL future. So the Buckeyes are down one of their best players, maybe their best player on the offensive line. So how are they going to hold up against Miami? I think Ryan Day can help at the beginning of the game with play calling, like I said, to keep Julian Sayin clean, keep him in the pocket. But ultimately, part of this game is going to come down to keeping Sayin safe, but also Ohio State is going to have to run the football against this Miami D-line. And like I said, they don't just rush passers. They bust your ass in the run game. Can I talk about Mario Cristobal and the Miami game plan for a second, Coach Drew?
Yeah, go ahead.
So here's my question about Miami. Cristobal committed to the run game on the road against the 12th man against the Texas A&M Aggies. So they adopted the pistol formation, shotgun with running back right behind you instead of beside the quarterback. If you guys on audio only don't understand that. But so the pistol formation allowed Mark Fletcher, who really is a power running back at heart. He's a good athlete. I love Mark Fletcher. He's a dog. That got Mark Fletcher going in the second half. As me and Coach Drew always say here on the Midwest Blitz, running the football is not something you do one or two times. It's a mentality. We're trying to crack a boulder with a sledgehammer sometimes. Maybe you run the ball early in the game. You don't get the level of production that you would like to, but you keep running it. Bam, 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 bam. And if you watch that Miami game, Mark Fletcher and the Miami offensive line, led by Francis Maui Noah, a boulder of a human being at right tackle, All-American, consensus All-American, they cracked the Texas A&M defense because they kept running it. Bang, 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 bang. I feel like that was a winning formula for Miami in the last game, and that's a winning formula in this game if Cristobal chooses to accept that again. And Coach Drew, if I was Mario Cristobal, that's what I would do. I would challenge Ohio State to stop the run game because Cristobal, like I just said on the other side of the football, Cristobal understands, and we talked about in our pregame show, Carson Beck doesn't want to drop back and throw 30 times, 35 times against this Ohio State defensive backfield because it's full of talent. And the same thing could be said on both sides of the ball. But Cristobal, I think, after watching the Indiana-Ohio State game, will say, well, hell, Indiana beat them. We've got a pretty good O-line. We got pretty good running backs. Indiana likes to run the ball, and Indiana sticks with the run versus Ohio State, has success, squeaks out a 3-point win. If I was Cristobal, that's exactly what I would do. I would force Ohio State to stop me running the ball. We might have to punt a few times. And you got, all right, that's boring. O-line talk, run, run, run. You got Malachi Tony. Malachi Tony is what I'll call him. Dude, one of the best wide receivers, one of the best all-purpose backs in the country. Trick plays, quick slants, deep balls. I think that the pound, running game, let's call it the boringness for casual football fans, can be offset by the fact that you always have to respect Malachi Tony on a jet sweep or slot fade or whatever. And Drew, what was the game-winning play in the Miami-Texas A&M game? Was an end around to Malachi Tony after Mark Fletcher busts the game open. Straight right, left hook. The left hook from Malachi Tony was the knockout punch in a run game plan. So running the ball is not always boring, football fans, if you pay attention. I think that Tony will be huge in this game. He absolutely will. But I think it starts with Fletcher, the leader, the upperclassman leader. Can we talk about Mark Fletcher's mom for a second? I love Mark Fletcher's mom. She drives all around the country to watch these games, and I thought that was awesome. I saw her in the stands celebrating and all that last week, Coach Drew. I think that Miami can keep this game closer than expected. The Ohio State fans are probably mad at me by now. Ohio State deservedly had the number one defense in the country all year. They have the by draft status #1 receiver core in the country. But Coach Drew, what am I missing there? I know I'm being unfair to Ohio State when I talk about Miami so much, but I'm just trying to figure out how this game will be interesting because I don't think the Buckeyes are going to blow them out of the building.
Well, let's just talk about this for a second. So, if we're looking at nerd stats, right, point differential all year, Ohio State has controlled that higher than them. Defensive points all season, Ohio State's an average have given up 8.8 to Miami's 13.8, right? I mean, these are small margins, and the SOS does favor Ohio State and everything, right? So Miami's looking like an underdog, which is probably right where they want to be. Now, as we're recording this podcast, one of the very interesting things, because they do have press conferences, the question did come up with Jeremiah Smith was, if he went back in time and knew Miami was going to be where they're at today, would he have signed with them? And boy, did he add fire to the fuel.
Did
Are you
an
laughing?
Ohio State fan dressed as a Miami fan ask him that question? That has got to be one of the most ridiculous questions I've ever heard, unless it was just a plant.
Well, I think somebody understands as much as what this game means to Cristobal, which I'm going to get to here back into a second. But man, they asked him and he goes, yeah, if the program was right on track to when I was in signing, I probably would have came here. Whoa. Let's just start right there. 2000, yeah. You're asking Cristobal, who was a graduate assistant who was here during 2002-2003 season, if you recall, when the tippity tap passes. I'm calling it now. If Miami wins, right, you'll definitely hear him say, well, luckily we have one of the best wide receivers in Tony. There's going to be some free shots. Cristobal is definitely going to let it loose. I mean, he's played for Miami, true and true. He played at the university. He was here during the graduate assistant during the Ohio State thing. I mean, dude, Smith, young kid, won a national championship. This guy, a lot of favorites to win the Heisman this year. That question was so ridiculous. I mean, it's almost like they could have said the same thing to Fernando Mendoza. Fernando, if you knew you were going to be this successful, would you have went to Miami? It's not fair.
Well, Fernando would have went to Miami because he's from there, and I understand. Jeremiah Smith's from there also, right?
Yep.
Of the entire giant tree of fruit of amazing football athletes from Miami, Florida, Smith was an easy one to see and pick, and Fernando Mendoza, obviously, his development was delayed, or I'm not going to talk about his high school career because it's going to bore everybody, but both guys had talent. One guy had obvious talent. He is at the Ohio State for a reason. Holy crap. That's the horrible thing, Coach Drew, about putting these young guys in front of these microphones like this. Because I guarantee you when Jeremiah Smith said that, he was not thinking about the blowback, or maybe he just doesn't care.
He might not care. I mean, he's making a lot of money at Ohio State.
I'm trying
Let that be clear. That was another thing, too.
I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt here, because if I was a Buckeyes fan, I would not feel real good about that. But, okay, let's take the other side of the coin. Me and Coach Drew are not ESPN media. We're not newspaper media. So I want the kids to be allowed to say what they're going to say. And so I guess I salute that. Coach Drew, maybe I'm being a bit of a puss right there where he shouldn't say what he thinks. Maybe that's fair.
Well, you're adding fuel to a fire. I mean, again, some of the other things, too, that I also wanted to ask you is, who do you think from Ohio State is going to cover up Tony? Tony's going to be definitely an offensive asset for Miami, one of the best and quickest.
Well, Tegra Shabola not Tegra Shabola, but Mendoza at quarterback for the Buckeyes has been much improved this year, and I think that they could put him on a lot of guys. Last year, Mendoza, if I'm not mistaken, led the country in defensive pass interference penalties. And that doesn't make you a bad corner, just like Christian Gray had a lot of them last year at Notre Dame. He had less this year. Christian Gray's a great cornerback, has a future in the National Football League, as does Mendoza. Dude, you got Mendoza. You also have in Ohio State, you have safety Caleb Downs, and you got linebackers there that can cover against wide receivers. It's not as simple as one-on-one matchup, Coach Drew. And I'll say it this way. If you disguise the coverage, the quarterback doesn't know where the mismatch is. And if you've got enough athletes at linebacker and safety, you can disguise it enough where they think that they've got man-to-man coverage, but then it's some kind of a zone, a match zone, a switch-off zone, if you guys follow what I'm saying, where down and distance, blah, 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 the defense looks at it and goes, we don't have to line up a guy that can cover you one-on-one for 40 yards down the field. We might line up a safety or linebacker close to you, and you don't know who's covering him because you don't know who's blitzing and all these things. I think that Ohio State will be fine in coverage. I don't think that Miami's going to try to beat him over the top with Tony too many times. I think that they're going to use Malachi Tony a lot of different ways. All-purpose back, one of the best in the country, Malachi Tony, probably better than Hank Beatty from Illinois, who I loved a lot, Coach Drew, you know that. Love Hank Beatty, looking forward still to him playing against the Tennessee Volunteers, Illinois receiver. I don't think that they're worried about matching up one-on-one against Malachi Tony. And you know what? I'll tell you this, that might be a mistake, but I know a lot of Buckeye people, and I've been watching Ohio State football for a long time. Ohio State football does not play conservative. Against Indiana, they went for it on fourth down, didn't get it. Things like that. That's what Ohio State does. If you get beat deep, back to Notre Dame example, if you get beat deep by a wide receiver, Ohio State doesn't say, oh, we should soften up and go zone. They say we should blitz next time and play man-to-man again. So I do think Mendoza can run with him. But nobody could run with that kid forever. Malachi Tony is athlete with 3 syllables. Like I said, last time we talked about Tony, the kid probably could be an all-state basketball player, all-state baseball player, all-state football player, all-state track athlete. Dude, this is going to be fun, and that is an X factor, Coach Drew. I always go offensive line. Coach Drew looks at not just special teams, but the skill position players. And Malachi Tony's a special one. Can you believe he's supposed to still be in high school, Coach Drew? Can you imagine that?
That is, yeah. Well, I mean, like, look at Smith. I mean, a lot of people say he should be in the NFL. I mean, it's just crazy, the development of athletes. And that actually brings up my next point. I think Carson Beck going into this game has more to lose than anybody else. Cristobal, I think, will be fine if they lose this game. I'm not saying well, actually, you know what? I'll tell you right now. My pick, I think Miami's going to lose to Ohio State. Ohio State, reigning national champions, only losses to the hopeful national champions, Hoosiers, right? But I'm not going to steal the spotlight from them, and we're not going to take away from this Ohio State segment. But when Miami lost to SMU and Louisville, those were blemishes, and nobody thought, okay, besides head-to-head, which the Hard Rock Cafe, or whatever the hell you call it, reminds us every 2 seconds that Notre Dame shouldn't be anywhere near college football. But Carson Beck's draft stock matters in this game more than anything else. He's going against high-level players on defense for Ohio State, the Ohio State. If he can manage to win this game and pull it off, I think his draft stock goes up. Now, I think he might be a day 2 quarterback right now. Many people last year thought he was a day 1 quarterback, but that's the difference between winning and losing in this game, and I think he has a lot more to gamble here. One of the fun things I do have in this game is, according to DraftKings, one of the prop bets, anytime scorer, I think Carson Beck scores a rushing touchdown. I don't know how I draw it up in my head. A tush push, maybe a misdirection where he runs one way and goes the opposite, but it's at plus 750. So if you want to throw a low amount of bones on that, I think that's a fun one to bet on and just something to watch for during the game.
All right, let me hit this again. Cristobal should stick with the pistol rushing attack that they had at A&M that they hadn't done earlier in the year. And if they do that, they're going to set Carson Beck up for success. So you were talking about Carson Beck's NFL future potentially. I think that Beck is going to do whatever it takes to win the game. And I think that if they win this game, it definitely gets him on NFL draft boards, raises his stock, helps him make some money, potential to play on Sundays because, like I said earlier, he's become kind of a selfless kid. I think that all the positive attention early for him when he was at Georgia, and then some of the negative attention that he got from some turnovers and from some injuries and from transferring. Look, I don't trust social media, guys. So if you're watching this and you're like, what's he talking about? Like, they talk shit about Carson Beck. He's definitely a very good college quarterback with NFL potential. But I think that if they can get the running game going, it gives Carson Beck an ability to run a 2-minute drill or like make a throw to win a game. And I think that, you know, like the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback from my favorite team, that those moments are what NFL scouts want to see. You're trying to, Drew, look at 20 different quarterbacks and see what's better about this, about that. And you're looking at 40 times heights, weights, and all this. And you're like, oh, clutch throw, bang, touchdown. I think that's what the high level, the good pro executives, they want to see that. They want to see you have a chance to win a game and be a team player. That's my opinion on
great.
that.
I think that's great insight. Are you ready to go to Oregon versus Texas Tech?
My God, am I ever, Coach Drew? Dude, this is Coach Drew. I wrote down, this may be the closest game of the weekend. This very well may be the closest game of the weekend. And I say that so excitedly because I look forward to these college football games and these college football playoff games all year. I live and sleep and die on them. You guys know that if you've been watching the Midwest Blitz. So I want to say this. Is Texas Tech a paper tiger or a real tiger? Now, I know the Texas Tech, they're the Red Raiders, Texas Tech is. But on paper, they have, according to Pro Football Focus and other analytical stats, I know some of you were like, well, Pro Football Focus analytics, whatever. I'm just reading you this. You'll see why I'm reading you this. Texas Tech has the number 1 Pro Football Focus ranked defense, number 1 total run defense, number 1 tackling defense, number 1 pass rush defense, number 1 coverage defense. So you're like, oh, that's a lot of stats. Now, Coach Drew, I'm going to tell you one of these that stands out above the others of other teams that dominate in PFF, potentially meaningless football stats is tackling. A lot of the teams that rank high in all these analytical stats don't rank high in tackling. And that's because the Red Raiders have one of the best linebacker cores in the country, led by Rodriguez, the stash in his stash bandito friends down there in Lubbock, Texas. I think Texas Tech's defense, especially their defensive front, is legit. I don't think that they face the level of passing game meaning scheme plus level of quarterback wide receivers that they're going to see here from the Oregon Ducks. So this is another immovable force versus the unstoppable object type of game with the Oregon running game against the brick wall defensive line of Texas A&M. I called him that early in the season when I watched him, and then I heard another announcer on TV say, this defensive line looks like a brick wall. And I was like, glad you said that because I agree. So how will offensive coordinator Stein for Oregon, how will he call this game? Will Dan Lanning, head coach Oregon, who we love and know very well, is he going to take over play calling because Stein's on his way out to take over another head coaching job? I think that's a storyline to look at. And how are they going to call the game, both of them, Stein and Lanning, if they struggle to run the ball early? Now, Coach Drew, I will tell you this, that Oregon's had no problem having a rock fight in the trenches running the football throughout the season, as you well know. With all the wide receiver injuries that Oregon has had throughout the year, there are times in the Big Ten. Big Ten, what do they do in the Big Ten, Coach Drew? They play defense and run the football, run the ball, and play defense up front. That is what they do in the Big Ten. Coach Drew always reminds me of that. I need him to help me with that. I appreciate that about you, Coach Drew. I love you, buddy. So if they start slow running the ball against the vaunted brick wall defensive line of the Texas Tech Red Raiders, are they going to stop running the ball, Coach Drew? My answer is no, I don't think they will. I don't think they'll give up on the run, just like I don't think IU will give up on the run if Alabama slows them down early. Dante Moore, looking like a top-level NFL draft pick at quarterback for Oregon. Love the kid all year. I was a little surprised that they were talking about him being potentially the number one quarterback drafted, just
Over your
because
boy.
Mendoza won the Heisman and all this, but Dante Moore is a pro-level quarterback.
Correct. He is a high-level quarterback. One of the things that I do want to mention about your paper tiger reference, I love that. If you look at it from a statistical standpoint, point differential, Texas Tech has it. The difference in points, or I'm sorry, I read it backwards. But basically, Texas Tech leads in point differential, defensive points, and SOS. Now, why does that matter? Usually, when you put a blindfold on and you say, compare A and B, you would just say one is better than the other. Well, not so fast, my friends. And this is one of the things that we were debating earlier when our pre-show conversations was, okay, Texas Tech quality wins this year, BYU again in the championship, and Utah number 16. Quality loss, I wouldn't even consider it quality, but it was Arizona State. Now, some might say that was against when they were down a quarterback and they were still fighting some things through the middle of the season. I get that. People go through it. Oregon, on the other hand, now here's where it gets kind of goofy. I put a star by it because James Franklin was still at Penn State. This was overtime. This is a big deal. Everybody thought right after Oregon beat Penn State that they were going to win the national championship. Dan Lanning, the road dog he is, did everything in his power to do that. Now, his loss on the season that he only had this year did come against Indiana on Oregon land. But again, when comparing Indiana to Arizona State, I give Oregon the positive right there. They also had to go on the road to beat Iowa. Not easy to do. They beat USC at home, one of their arch rivals from the Pac-12. Pac-10, they played each other. So you're looking at Oregon. It's kind of funny. We were joking about this earlier, naming this Nike money versus oil money. What can it buy you? Well, I can tell you oil money can definitely buy you a good team. How good is this team? That's what we're debating here, ladies and gents. Right, Nick?
Yeah, Coach Drew. I think that I always like to compare these late season football games to boxing matches or cage fights, to a combat sport, to a wrestling match where you've got two guys that maybe have equal talent on paper, two teams that have equal talent on paper, and then you're trying to look at all these analytics and all this bullshit that we get tired of looking at as hardcore, old school sports people. The difference, to summarize what Coach Drew said, is that Oregon is a title contender who's fought a bunch of other top 5 fighters. And Texas Tech is a team whose best wins are against BYU, who they physically dominated up front. I love BYU. I love BYU's coach a lot, by the way. But the best wins that Texas Tech has, even the losses and the struggles, if you watch the tail of the tape on these two teams and look at it as fighters, Oregon is war-tested right now. It goes back to Thomas Hagler and Marvin Hearns all those years ago in the 80s. Old guys who love boxing know Thomas Hitman Hearns was long, lengthy, scary, was a great fighter, but marvelous Marvin Hagler put him down. I think 4th round, one of the greatest boxing matches of all time. Look up Hagler Hearns if you've never watched it. Even if you don't like boxing, you should do it. I think, Coach Drew, that the point I'm getting at is that Oregon has been through these big time championship level bouts against other physical Big Ten teams. Texas Tech has not. I do have faith that Texas Tech on defense can slow Oregon down in the running game, even though Oregon's got one of the best power running games in the country. I am not doubting Oregon. Oregon is not a finesse team. Oregon is a power team that then chooses to sometimes humiliate you with finesse, over-the-top football, like Dante Moore throwing to backup wide receivers against James Madison in the first half of that first-round college football playoff game. No shade at the Ducks. I think, Drew, Oregon looks like the potential champion here more than Texas Tech. And honestly, this 4 and 5 seed matchup, Coach Drew, these are the lowest seeded teams that have a chance to actually win this football tournament. I mean, you've talked about that for a few weeks, but there's no Ole Miss. We're about to talk about Ole Miss. Ole Miss does not have a chance to win this tournament. They might have a chance to beat Georgia, a familiar opponent, a familiar and hated foe in the Southeastern Conference. But there's no way before we get to that game, and I don't know if I'm spoiling the breakdown before we get there. There is no way that Ole Miss could run the gauntlet of this tournament and come out on top. Now, they might win a game. But Coach Shu, didn't you have something to say about Texas Tech, though? I mean, this Red Raiders team does deserve a lot of respect. We're just not sure, since they came from the Big 12, if they've played the same level of competition, but you did have a good note.
Yeah, Texas Tech hasn't got a lot of love of recent, especially because they are part of the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12 has, in the past, got a lot of good teams that come out of there. I mean, look at Texas, Oklahoma. They used to be part of the Big 12. Now they moved on to the SEC land. But yeah, these are teams that remotely do that. I mean, it's the same thing with Oregon. Oregon used to be a Pac-12 team, Pac-10 team, but now they're part of the Big 10. But one of the things I do want to mention about this great defense is, besides their mustaches, great mustaches, this will help, again, going back to Carson Beck's case, right? This is actually one of the times that, in a long time, I can't really recall last year, but draft prospects and boards are moving up and down real fast because Dante Moore is going against another good defense. The last defense Dante Moore went against that he had troubles with, I'll just note Indiana. Now, they were going back and forth, and IU didn't take the lead until 6 minutes and 26 seconds to go in the fourth quarter, right? Indiana did win that game, but Dante Moore, I remember watching that game, threw like a weird toss-up at the end. There was another pick he did. It was ill-advised. I mean, they did lose by 10, but can Dante Moore move up his stock? Now the Raiders, not the Red Raiders, but the Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, Los Angeles Raiders, whichever year you're from and listening to, we got people from all types of genres and years. So one of the things I want to talk about them is Dante Moore fits their quarterback search. This looks like an old-time Al Davis quarterback. Somebody he would lick his chops to see back in the day. So, can he prove prove
Cannon for an arm.
if you could throw from your knee 60 yards, you can get
Al
drafted.
Davis is drafting you.
Well, one of the things I do want to mention for your prop bets before we get into our next game, I do want to mention this. I do got Winningham from Oregon scoring. That's at plus 125. I saw some runs Texas Tech's just not going to be able to cover up. They're going to be spreading the ball around, and I think he gets in for 6. So lock that one down and put some bones on it, ladies and gents.
Coach Drew, is it New Year's Day yet, or am I just living in a dream?
It's a dream right now.
Feels like a dream as my number 1 ranked Indiana Hoosiers come in -7 against the formidable Alabama Crimson Tide on New Year's Day in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. Is Indiana favored? Yes, they are. What advantages, Coach Drew, I asked rhetorically, does Indiana or does Alabama? You stamp that.
Yeah.
See, every time I do Indiana, I think about it too. I'm like, yeah, I want to sound really cool. No, just fucking say the football stuff. Tell me it.
We love you,
say it. Say, Nick, just say the football stuff.
Nick, just say the football stuff.
Can you say it with some conviction, please?
I feel like we're in school. Nick, say the football stuff.
I fucked the whole thing up. I fuck every Indiana segment up. I never do a good job on the Indiana segment.
Crash out. Listen, just think about it. We're just talking Indiana football.
I know, but nobody
cool.
believes me when I talk Indiana. I have a complex. This is decades long. See, this is a shitty... Are they favored? Yeah, they're favored, you fucking faggot. They're ranked number 1 in the country. Who wrote this? I did.
This is like the Grinch monologue.
It is, dude. This whole holiday season every year is me versus, like, being an asshole. And I'm like,
I don't Ohio State fan. Every Christmas it's me against the world. All right, Ohio State. We're going to call you Buckeye Nick.
Oh, it's me versus myself of being an asshole. Yeah, we're ranked number 1. We are number 1. We're the fucking best.
The best.
Like, I started, okay, I'm going to vent to you for a second. I know we're recording. You're like, I don't
No,
want
I
to
can edit
fucking
it.
do this.
Timestamp, all it says is like when you guys are talking non to the extra, and I just click a button and edits it all out. Riverside edits a lot of faster stuff.
I noticed this the whole time. And the better the season got for Indiana, the worse it was true. I'm always like arguing against the doubters and all this shit. Why am I doing that? Why? Because I'm an IU football fan. I'm acting like an IU football fan. I don't need to act like an IU football fan. I need to act like somebody who knows football, which Nick, who knows football, doesn't act like a pussy when he looks at the game and says Indiana should win because Alabama can't run the ball. Nick, who's a football fan who doesn't act like a pussy, knows that Indiana's going to win because they actually have better athletes than Alabama.
Yep.
But I wanted to come out and sound cool and talk a bunch of shit, and then it doesn't sound cool at all. If I just talk the football shit, like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like the pitcher who's just like, who's babying the curveball. You're like, don't baby it, just throw it. I'm doing that. And I hate it. I've been doing it for a while. And that's when I was telling you, when I was like, dude, our IU subscribers and fan interactions are lacking. And I said, I think it's my fault. It is my fault because I need to just talk my football shit and not be like, look here, you Alabama fans. Like stop being a fucking faggot. And that's what I've been doing. And I'm fucking pissed about it. That's why I stopped. Because we're going to regroup this, and I am not fucking doing this again. Dude, I am fucking pissed at myself so hard. Like, every time we've done this with Indiana down the stretch, I'm like, yes, and look, Indiana is good at football. Oh, we're so lucky. Like, it makes me want to puke. So, you have to rest with me in my self-disgust while I just, like, have a moment here.
It's all right. When you go over to Tyler's next time, you get arrested by Cruz in his police outfit. I just sent you a picture of that to hopefully make you feel better.
Might as well go to Elwood.
We got to save the Calumet City Church.
Indiana does not have an athlete disadvantage in this game. Alabama has no run game. All right. I legitimately... Help me, Drew. I need your help here. Because I don't like sounding biased, but I really feel like Indiana is going to whoop their ass. And so I'm being all fucking cutesy about it. If this was any other game, I would be just smooth. I've watched both these teams as much as anybody. Alabama outside the Big Ten as much as anybody. And I'm being like, this and that.
I got you. Be locked in.
I'm the worst IU football fucking college football podcaster. I probably know the most about it and do the worst at explaining it. It's just...
Yeah, all right, buddy. We're going to do this. If it helps you, I got a lot of notes. So you're not going to sound biased. You're just going to sound like we know what we're talking about.
You're like, get in the batter's box.
No, if you want, how about this?
Let me scroll down my notes for you real quick, because I feel like I'm going to start like ranting. Alabama no run game. Slow start versus Oklahoma. They can't survive that versus the Hoosiers. They have a very good defense with a questionable pass rush. Their pass protection versus stunts has been bad, has the Crimson Tide. Now, I'm just reading you this, and I'm going to riff, and then if I forget, or it doesn't matter if I forget something. This ain't Nick Saban's Alabama. That should have been the fucking lead. See, this ain't your dad's Indiana. That's the lead. But I do it in opposite direction. When I do Indiana, I start with all the like stats and facts and then go to the main point. Sorry, this part means a lot to me, and I know I have not done a good job at it. And then every time I start doing it, I'm like, well, I'm doing it again. Like if we just fucking did another game, I would be like, we're not moving on to another game. But if I was doing another game, it would not happen. It's just...
We're good, buddy.
Yeah, these fucking notes suck. Who wrote these notes? Slow start. All right, have you composed yourself yet?
Yep, I'm good.
Coach Drew, on New Year's Day at noon, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide, the 9 seed, against the number 1 seed in all the land, the Indiana Hoosiers.
Hoosiers.
So, what do the legendary Alabama Crimson Tide have in terms of advantages against the Hoosiers? And I'm struggling to find one, Coach Drew. They have a very good defense that has not rushed the passer very well all year. If you look at wide receiver defensive back matchups and the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, there is no advantage for Alabama there. I know that SEC fans and Alabama fans that are watching this would say, yeah, they've got better athletes. Where are they? They do not have better athletes. Indiana has 2 All-American wide receivers. They have 2 All-American defensive backs, plus a guy who was All Big Ten last year that didn't make it this year for some reason. I know that they think that Indiana doesn't play football in the Southeastern Conference. They're about to find out that they do. Alabama had a slow start versus Oklahoma, came back, won the game. If you watched the last episode of the Midwest Blitz, I explained to you that I knew Alabama would win that game because the coaching staffs were not equal. Venables got out-coached by Kalen DeBoer. What Alabama does, Coach Drew, and I love this, with their lack of running game, it's a masterful coaching job if you look at it this way, is that Alabama plays full-court press football. What do I mean by that? Well, if you watch basketball in the NCAA tournament, bear with me for a second, if you put enough pressure on the other team, you can get down by a sizable margin and then come back and win because you force the other team into mistakes. Pressure bursts pipes, correct, Coach Drew? We know that from our baseball experiences. Well, Indiana doesn't burst under pressure. Indiana is the pipe that contains the pressure. There is no advantage that Alabama has. I think that Ty Simpson deserves a lot of credit in the matchup against Fernando Mendoza, that Mendoza is the most clutch player in the country. But I think that Ty Simpson, if he had the same offensive line and the same coaching staff, might be capable of doing the same things, because how the hell does Ty Simpson win some of these games? How does Alabama control time of possession with no running game? I think that DeBoer and Ty Simpson carry the rest of this roster and this, frankly, this defensive coordinator and offensive line coach that can't get these talented guys like Caden Proctor. Not direct shade at Caden Proctor, but they have talent on the offensive line. Why can't they run block? Well, we're going to see why they can't run block when they play the Indiana Hoosiers, because this is what you talk about on the line on both sides of the ball, from Pee Wee football to pro football. Low man wins, leverage, gap leverage, pad level. The Indiana Hoosiers have guys that are no star and 2-star and 3-star guys who will fire off the ball hard every single time on both sides of the ball. The Indiana Hoosiers, as I said, have 2 All-American level wide receivers, Cooper and the Waffle House, Elijah Surratt. They also have Charlie B from Tennessee, Charlie Becker, at wide receiver, who busted the Ohio State Buckeyes ass after I told Buckeye White, I'm like, hey, you ever heard of Charlie Becker? He did pretty good when our best wide receiver was hurt. And the Buckeye fans said, no, yeah, he had a pretty good game. Yeah, well, he had like 6 catches for 85 yards or whatever it was against the Buckeyes. The Hoosiers are deep. They are athletic. The Hoosiers don't have the most 5-stars. What Curt Cignetti is teaching the college football world right now is that recruiting stars don't matter as much as you think they do, Coach Drew. Have we not been saying this on the Midwest Blitz since July in our pre-show conversations? Stars are worth something. You know what stars get you, Coach Drew? You got to pay those recruiting stars more money in your NIL. Indiana is deeper and more athletic because they're not buying you based on recruiting stars. They're selling kids that didn't have these recruiting stars to come in because they want to win. These kids come in because they want to be winners, not because they want the money. Look, Coach Drew, I want money. You want money. I'm not doubting anybody or throwing shade because you want money. But Indiana's got more talent. Let's call it, if there's a salary cap, Indiana's got more talent per salary cap than any team in the country, because they get guys that have produced and had to dig out of the bottom of the barrel at a MAC school at a Sunbelt school, so on and so forth, and what have you with regard to that. Indiana's going to bring a smash mouth running game at Alabama with Roman Hemby and Kalon Black. Kalon Black, wait till you see the spin move. Wait till you see the 5'9" running back lower the shoulder. Crimson Tide fans, he's coming for you. And this is not a critique of Alabama because I haven't watched them. I've been watching Alabama all year and trying to figure out why this offensive line coach can't get these guys to block in the running game. I don't know what they do during the week, if they're playing Xbox or if they're playing PlayStation or they're too involved in their studies at school, which if they are, then good for them. But this front seven for Indiana is fast, physical, and relentless as Kurt Cignetti and offensive coordinator Mike Shanahan. It's the best coaching staff in the country, potentially the best head coach in the country, but I don't want to take anything away from Kirby Smart or Ryan Day. I love Ryan Day. I think he's great. I'm not an Ohio State fan. I am an Indiana fan. But I don't see how Alabama wins this game, let alone covering 7 points. And the betting public is 60% Alabama, 40% Indiana. That's because only 3% of them watched an IU game all year. Coach Drew, what say you, my friend?
Yeah, one of the things, again, looking at this one, again, previously discussed, we're looking at quarterbacks who are potentially getting drafted high in the first round, and we're seeing all of them this weekend. Weekday, New Year's. When Mendoza goes against Simpson, we're looking at possibly the future #1 overall draft pick. Now, I already told my buddy, huge Raiders fan, I told him if the Raiders draft Mendoza, you got to rock a Mendoza jersey, right? One of the things that a lot of people are going to probably take away from Mendoza is, well, he's going to California. How will he fare? He just came from the University of Cal. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to talk about there. He's won the Heisman. He's welcomed in California. Another thing, too, did you know this? Alabama's furthest they traveled west this year was to Oklahoma. They haven't been far as west to California, while Indiana, on the other hand, traveled and won at Oregon. So that's a factor to play into travel and playing far away from home. So why does that matter? Well, DeBoer, yes, he did coach at Washington, so he is familiar with the land. This isn't the Oregon Trail, but he does know USC, the Coliseum, the Rose Bowl, all that stuff. He's familiar with that area. Indiana did win on the road against Oregon. I do want to mention that. Why that's going to be a big factor is because they're going to be ready to play on the West Coast. A lot of people think Indiana is just this imaginary team that's only played in Indiana, and it's a small school that doesn't play primetime football. Listen, I get it. A lot of people are going to be like, well, they played in Indianapolis, which is right down the street from Bloomington, and beat Ohio State. That's not really a Big Ten championship. Okay, where do you want the Big Ten championship to be? It's always been there. Stop the excuses, right? Same thing when they went to Oregon, right? They didn't move Oregon. They played where balls be played. Another thing, too, is Cignetti can smell the other side of Alabama, knowing Saban's not there. Okay? Cignetti is an old coach. Or has, again, and I'm going to hit this again, he always looks like he's in trouble. In comparison, Indiana is well more polished team than Oklahoma. And I say that because Alabama just spotted them 17 in the last game. Indiana, right? I think Mendoza's way better than Mateer. Okay. And I get it. He's injured, coming back and everything. But I mean, if you look at the comparisons, I mean, Hemby and Black, the two running backs for Indiana, are going to be pounding the ball. One of the things I do want to mention, my prop bet of this game, is Charlie Becker to score anytime touchdown plus 170. If you guys are paying attention and you're taking Coach Drew's prop bets. But those are some things that I'm looking at. Another thing, too, right, is Bama's losses. Now, if we talk about Bama's losses, but Notre Dame lost to Miami and Texas A&M, right? But Alabama lost to FSU, right? Which was a bad loss. Oklahoma, pretty equal, I guess. And they beat Georgia earlier in the year, which was a good win for them. But then lost by a lot in the championship. Now, Alabama's going to play this game. We split games or whatever. Well, guess what? You lose the first one, buddy. So guess what? Indiana's going to take this one, Nick, and I have all faith they will. There's a reason why they're number one, and Alabama barely snuck in and took somebody's spot. BYU, I'm not even going to throw Notre Dame in there. I mean, holy hell. How does this happen?
So, all right. Bama had been bad on the road this year, Coach Drew. That was one of my questions going into the Oklahoma rematch, even though I picked Alabama. Well, DeBoer answered that question, so this is a plus for Tide fans who are listening, if they're still listening to us after we picked Indiana 4 or 5 times by now. I also want to point this out. Curt Cignetti is a better coach than Kalen DeBoer. And as an Indiana fan, DeBoer was at Indiana with Tom Allen when Indiana was on an uptrend. I know a lot of people weren't watching that. And everyone at Indiana had, including me, including my dad, we all had fond thoughts and opinions about Kalen DeBoer. But that being said, after Cignetti getting to Indiana, and DeBoer going to Washington, taking former Indiana quarterback Michael Penix and making him a Heisman candidate up there and all that. And then Alabama hires DeBoer. I thought, that makes sense. This guy is an elite head coaching, 10, 20-year potential great head coach. Didn't even know who Curt Cignetti was at the time. Somehow, after all the dust settles on that, if you guys are following me, Indiana ends up with a better, more seasoned head coach, granted without the 10 to 20-year potential based off of his age being about 64 years old, I believe. But Cignetti's experience in the college football playoffs and having a lot of key players back from that, it's just different for Indiana right now. They've overcome so much adversity, and I think that they were IU fans. You tell me if I'm wrong in the comments, you always do. Indiana was humiliated that they lost at Ohio State the way they did. I know special teams had more to do with that than anything else, but still, even Curt Cignetti said when the offensive line was criticized at Notre Dame, Curt Cignetti said that it was not the offensive line's fault alone and that turnovers and other position groups cost Indiana winning that game. I think they all took that as a team and they grew collectively because of it. If you were a coach at any level and you followed it the way I did, Cignetti told them all, like, nobody played up to their potential in this game, and next time we're going to do better. It's just like a sports movie where the coach is like, yes, we should have won last year, but then we're going to work hard in the offseason. Like, Cignetti did all that. Indiana's got the coaching advantage. Indiana's got the talent advantage. They've got the depth advantage. D'Angelo Pons at cornerback for Indiana. I'm going to say it again. I'll scream it from a mountaintop when we do our NFL draft coverage. D'Angelo Pons is just as talented as any athlete, wide receiver, or defensive back in this game. He's undersized at 5'9" to 5'10", but him being a little shorter allows him to collect his feet and jump to play the ball in the air. That's why nobody throws the ball at him, Coach Drew. His numbers were down a little bit this year because nobody throws at D'Angelo Pons. The Ohio State Buckeyes threw at him, and Indiana had Pons one-on-one against Jeremiah Smith, and Smith caught his ball. Smith is a great player. Pons at 20 or 50 pounds smaller and 6 inches shorter had no trouble covering in the red zone or at any point on the field covering Jeremiah Smith. He's not going to have a problem covering Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams or Jeremy Bernard, they could bust 1 or 2 long plays. The thing about Pons, and this is what you want in an NFL cornerback, is that they might get beat once. They're not getting beat 2 or 3 times because they make adjustments and they're a good tackler. Pons is a great tackler. The Aiden Fisher led front 7 of Indiana is not going to have any problem stopping the running game here. And they're not going to have any problem rushing the passer either. I don't see how Alabama gets out of this alive. I just hope that Ty Simpson is healthy by the end of it because they're not going to be able to drop back 40 times in this game without Simpson getting hit a lot.
That is true. And I think, again, there's a reason why Indiana's number 1, and I need people to understand this, okay? It's a new era. embrace it.
Yeah, this
You got
is
any?
not the blue blood schools are not hoarding. Coach, sure, I know we've talked about this a bunch of times, but for anybody listening, the blue blood schools are not hoarding all the elite talent. And I'm not even saying that Indiana has more on paper elite talent than Alabama, but they have more depth of talent at every point. They have guys that come in as backups like Charlie Becker did against Ohio State. Charlie Becker busted Ohio State's ass, and the Ohio State fans didn't even know who he was. And we love you, Ohio State fans. We love you for watching the Midwest Blitz. But Indiana has players that you've never heard of that will hurt you when they get a chance to come in the game. Indiana's lead pass rusher, Stephen Daly, is out after a freak injury celebrating after the Big Ten title game. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but it really is the next man up mentality for Indiana, where everybody's just expected to do what their job is on that play, whether it's be an edge rusher or it's push the pocket as an interior defender or so on and so forth, what have you, Coach Drew. I could go on about this Indiana Hoosier team all day. Do you have anything to finish up on, or would you like to move on to the next game?
We can move on, but I hope to see Mendoza, Mendoza, get the W.
Fernando as Mendoza, the most clutch quarterback in the country. And if people have questions about Fernando Mendoza, go back and watch the game-winning drives that the Hoosiers have had this year. He's not just making throws with a clean pocket. He's getting hit. He's taking it in the chops and delivering clutch throw after clutch throw. That's why he will be the number one quarterback selected in this upcoming NFL draft, Coach Drew.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can move on to Ole Miss versus Georgia. Our last game we're covering of the night.
Coach Drew, we made it to the last game of the night. It is the number 6 seeded Ole Miss Rebels plus 6.5 against Georgia, the number 3 seeded Georgia Bulldogs. So what's changed since Georgia won a shootout against Ole Miss earlier in the year, Coach Drew? And besides Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss, yes, I said Lane Kiffin. We don't like Lane Kiffin here on the Midwest Blitz. We don't appreciate what he did to the Ole Miss Rebels. And honestly, my heart kind of goes out to Ole Miss in this situation. I'm not a fan of either one of these teams, but the thing that's changed more than anything is that Georgia's defense has gotten better. And with all due respect to Ole Miss, if Georgia's defense can rush the passer and cover better, which they have statistically and by observation since that game, 6 games ago or so, I don't see how Ole Miss wins this game. We always talk about rematches, Coach, right? We talked about Ole Miss Tulane being a rematch, and that score ended up being almost identical to the original score, despite the best effort of Tulane. So I want to throw this out there in defense of Ole Miss, because I'm not saying that Georgia's going to blow them out. Ole Miss has they've gotten criticized for their lack of running production at times. And they did not produce that well in the run game against Georgia the first time, but they did when they got in the red zone. Ole Miss moved the ball into the red zone, threw it, dink dunk, throw long, whatever, gets in the red zone, and then they spread you out in the red zone to produce running production, if that makes sense, Coach Drew. So it's possible that Ole Miss makes this a shootout and wins it, but I think that Georgia's coverage and their defensive line, pass rush, and run stopping has gotten better since the beginning of the year. I mean, Georgia had the game against Alabama earlier in the year where they gave up a ton of points, and then their defense stepping up in the second half, but I don't think that Ole Miss has really improved in any key areas enough for me to expect this to go differently a second time.
Yeah, there's a lot that could be said about this game. Ole Miss has no Lane Kiffin. It is an SEC battle, which, sometimes we will see. I mean, at this point, we might see another Big Ten matchup, right? It's a very interesting thing. It was a high-scoring game last time, and like you said, Georgia's defense has gotten a lot better. And that's what the key is here. Lane Kiffin's gone. Charlie Weiss Jr. from Charlie Weiss, the coordinator who was with the Patriots and Notre Dame at one point. His son is still going to be coaching Ole Miss's offense. Now, he's going to LSU next year. will he be distracted? Part 2, right? Playing against Georgia and playing against Tulane are like 2 different divisions. Okay, not taking away from anything Tulane, but literally the Eagles defense is Georgia's Bulldogs defense. Like, that's how crazy and how well they produce NFL type players. And I will say this, Georgia won at home last time, right? This is going to be on a neutral site. I just don't see. I mean, I want Ole Miss to win because it's a Cinderella story, and I want them to keep going until they play Indiana or somebody where I can't root for them. But I mean, I almost want to see Ole Miss win. But unfortunately, Kirby Smart is smart, and he's going to take care of the ball and do everything he needs to do. But the question is, can Ole Miss hold the ship together? One of the things I will say here is the Ole Miss quarterback is plus 130 touchdown. I do think he's going to scramble in and score one. So Chambliss to score in at plus 130 is one of my prop bets. But I don't think Ole Miss wins this. I think Georgia just takes care of it. The goal for Ole Miss is to get Georgia to punt. How about that? That was a literal quote.
The Bulldogs, Coach Drew, and I do like your analysis. Chambliss is elite and is a legit NFL prospect for the Rebs and can run. He's not a guy that needs to run it, but is smart enough to read a defense and know when to run it. If we covered the SEC more, I would talk a lot more about Chambliss and how much I like him as a quarterback. Like, he can drop back, put his foot in the ground, get it out on time, and drop back, put his foot in the ground, and be like, oh, they're not spying me. They're straight man coverage. I can scramble, get a first down, get a touchdown. So I like that prop bet, Coach Drew. I was going to point this out, though. The Georgia Bulldogs won time of possession in the first game, 38 minutes to 22 minutes. And this will wear down the Rebels' defense in the second half, where Georgia's able to run the ball more effectively. And that's the thing we go back to here on the Midwest Blitz when we talk about trench play, when we talk about running game, stopping the running the ball on both sides of the ball, is that Georgia controlled time possession that drastically the first game. They're going to attempt the same thing because they know that it will wear down the opponent. Kirby Smart, one of the best coaches in the country. I will say this, though, Coach Drew. I think that Ole Miss's coaching staff, even the ones that are leaving, I felt like they were locked in the Tulane game. There was a lot of enthusiasm from the Ole Miss fans and all that stuff. I don't question coaching for Ole Miss other than to say that Kirby Smart might be the best in the game for Georgia. Shout out to Nick from Rate Game. I know he's a Georgia Bulldogs fan out there on the East Coast. I think Georgia wins this. I'm not saying that they win by a ton. I just don't see improvement from Ole Miss early in the season that I see from Georgia and their defense being much better. Also, Kirby Smart, best special teams head coach in college football. They'd blocked roughly 18 kicks and punts over the last 3 seasons, and some of them in key situations. I love special teams. I coached little special teams back in the day when I was coaching high school football. It is fun to see teams that are good in kick coverage, good in blocking kicks, punts. Dude, that's game-changing when that happens. And that's I'm going to call that the X factor of this game, is that if Georgia has the type of special teams plays that they sometimes create, especially, Drew, I would say against a familiar opponent. Because I'll tell you what, a special teams guy who's drawing up blocks and all this, they're sneaky, Coach Drew. They watch you walk down the street 1 time, 2 times, 5 times, 10 times, and they're like, I'm going to pick your pocket this next time, because it's one of the nuances of coaching that I'm not going to try and draw it up because some audio listeners only and we don't have time for it. But dude, these guys that are great special teams coaches, I was not a great special teams coach, but you start listening to them, because I watched some conferences and whatever back in the day. They're like, oh, this is their punt protection. This is their kick protection. This is their field goal protection. Look, this guy's lazy, or they've got this on this side. They're just waiting to steal your wallet. That's my analogy that I want to make. I don't know if Georgia will be able to do that in this game, but in a game, Coach Drew, where you have coaching turnover from the Ole Miss Rebels, I would like a gold medal or at least a steak dinner if we see some kind of a block kick, block punt, kick return touchdown, punt return touchdown from the Bulldogs. because I really love that about Kirby Smart, the special teams play.
Well, one of the things too that the SEC, some of their radio hosts, podcasters, I had to put up my hood like a Jedi and go through uncharted lands to hear what they were talking about. But one of the things that they fear is Georgia's going to come out slow, maybe a little sluggish because they had that bye. Something they've seen in the past was Kirby Smart. So, with that being said, that's one of my last things I do want to mention with this game. If Ole Miss can get those Rebels going early and hop against those Georgia Bulldogs, they have a fighting chance. If they also start out slow, man, you're just watching a snake about to eat its food, moving slow, methodically, measuring, and then going for the attack.
Love that, Coach Drew. Old National Geographic callback. Have you ever watched a snake about to eat something? It's not pleasant, but it's definite. Maybe that is what happens. Yeah, Rebs got to start fast. They can't get down. I think that if Ole Miss wins the game, they have to come out fast on offense. And speaking of fast on offense, they scored a touchdown the first 5 possessions against the Georgia Bulldogs last time. Not easy to do. Very respectable. They might score 6 without Lane Kiffin. I don't know. I might be wrong. I might be a little biased. Might be a little anti-lame at this point.
Yeah. Well, guys, we have 4 excellent games, 4 rateable games. What if there was an app, Nick, that we can go ahead and rate these 4 games on? Is there something out there like that?
Coach Drew, you're talking about the Rate Game app, and the Rate Game app is a social media app that is for hardcore sports fans who love to watch games and then go in, rate the games on a scale of 1 to 10, and then leave comments about why they ranked them the way they were. One of the highest rated college football games of the year was Indiana at Penn State, where Fernando Mendoza led the comeback and had the catch of the year, courtesy of Omar Cooper, All-American wide receiver for the Indiana Hoosiers. But people can go in there and explain why the throw and catch by Fernando Mendoza and Omar Cooper and the drama and the 2-minute drill, why that was one of the best games they watched all year. You get to go in there and talk to other fans. Somebody told me, Coach Drew, that this was like a Reddit conversation, and there is a similarity, but the difference is on Rate Game is that you get to follow creators like me and Drew and then other fans who watch a ton of ball games, and the conversations you have back and forth amongst games in different sports leagues, from college football to NFL to NBA, WNBA, Major League Baseball, is that you get to see other fans who appreciate the game and have an eye for the game like you do, like Coach Drew does, and I hope I do as well. And then you start to exchange notes with people that you never met before, just talk ball with them. It's a sports app, a sports social media app that involves no gambling, which is refreshing in the era of ESPN Bet. Oh, wait, ESPN Bet? I don't think they're doing that anymore. But anyway, they try and shove the gambling stuff down your throat way too much. I don't appreciate it. Coach Drew doesn't appreciate it. We're not telling you you're wrong if you want to throw a few bones on a game once in a while, but the Rate Game app is a way to talk to other sports fans and have deep sports conversations that have a meaningful return. That's been my takeaway since we partnered with Nick at the Rate Game app, and I really appreciate it, Coach Drew.
Yeah, one of the nice things, one of the nice little niches that they have this year is you can also get your recap of your whole season. So you can see where you rank amongst other fans, how many games you rated and stats and everything. Just if you love sports, you can see all your stats, how many games you rated, what was your highest rated, what was all your comments. Similar to Spotify Rap, YouTube Rap, Rate Game has it too now. Well, I think that is going to be a great segue to the Midwest Goodbye, where we have a few couple subjects that don't have to do with anything we have to do with the college football playoffs, but is always meaningful on the Midwest Goodbye. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, Coach Drew, you stole my thunder there. I was supposed to say, as usual, this feels like the beginning of a Midwest Goodbye.
It does.
Okay, Coach Drew, we wanted to touch on Matt Campbell taking the Penn State job and Kyle Whittingham taking the Michigan job. We already touched on those, each of them individually briefly, but we've had a little more time to reflect. and think about what it means for the programs going into next season and in the long term. Coach Drew brought up to me earlier, and I'm going to let him take this for a second after I bring it up, that Matt Campbell took over Penn State. We both thought that was a great hire, especially as late in the coaching cycle as it was. Matt Campbell from Iowa State, he took Iowa State football to new heights. People from Iowa hate Iowa State, and people from Iowa State hate people from Iowa. I just love people from the state of Iowa. That's my position on that. But Matt Campbell was great for the Iowa State Cyclones and built them into a team that was a Big 12 contender and a fun team to watch year in, year out, well coached. But their recruiting class, after the debacle of firing James Franklin early in the season, left the cupboard bare in Happy Valley, Coach Drew. As you told me earlier, the recruiting class coming in for Penn State is now by Rivals and 24/7 Sports. Rivals and 24/7 Sports is basically equal to the UMass Minutemen out of our beloved MAC conference, but are probably the worst team in the MAC conference, Coach Drew, if that's fair to say. Penn State having an equal recruiting class to UMass is not a good start for Campbell, but he has a long-term contract of 8 years. So how do we think that Matt Campbell, who is a terrific coach and a program builder, as we've talked about, how is he going to fill those gaps, Coach Drew?
Yeah, one of the things that is different that I want to point out that Matt Campbell has that he didn't have at Iowa State is $30 million in NIL spending. So there is an NIL spending budget that is going to be
Did you say
that's going to
3
help him.
million?
30 million.
30. Wow. 3 times 10. That's a lot of money, Coach Drew.
Yep. And these are a
30.
lot of yeah. There's a
God dang,
lot.
that's a lot of money. I mean, sorry. Sitting in my kitchen office here, I'm like, 30 million. Last year, Ohio State had like 20-some million. But it is an arms war, Coach Drew. I wasn't cutting you off to say that you're wrong, but just to highlight the arms war that is going on, the spending of college football program building. Go ahead. I will not talk for a minute.
You're good. And so that's according to our news sources. So January 2nd, once the portal opens up for some players in the transfer portal, Matt Campbell literally gets to take lots of students on tours and go, hey, for a couple mil, you want to throw a football here? You want to catch a football? You want to tackle some guys over here? You want to play football at Penn State? So it's going to be interesting to see how fast they climb. James Franklin has already got Virginia Tech in the top 25 for the 26 class. I know that they play into the transfer portal, kind of plays into how we dedicate recruiting classes. We just say true freshmen, only freshmen entering, and then overall portal. It's a weird mess that they do nowadays. But going back to the meat and potatoes, Matt Campbell is going to have some money to spend. And like you said, Ohio State spent about 20. Now they get 30. You also have Jeremiah Smith from earlier who said if Miami didn't have their shit together, would he go there? That's also money. He's worth a lot of money. And then there is rumors that he may go somewhere else. We're not going to go any further than that. But money does talk. Money makes people walk. That's why, i.e., Matt Campbell's at Penn State, because he needs money to get help. There's a lot of quarterbacks there, too.
So Penn State fans have to feel pretty salty. I think you said that James Franklin has a top 25 recruiting class right now going into Virginia Tech. Some of those are players that he stole. He used the word stole loosely, but players that he took from Penn State who he's recruiting. Yeah, Matt Campbell has the potential via transfer portal and maybe taking some good players from the Cyclones with him to Happy Valley. I do want to say this because you just made kind of a notation that we used to just classify recruits as freshmen, sophomore, transfer. And I've noticed this, Coach Drew, in my 125 years, or it feels like that, of following college sports with my late father, where the first thing we would look at on a depth chart is like, how tall is this kid and what class is he in? And I notice now, even if you go to ESPN to look up stats or like go to articles, you read articles about players and they don't even tell you what class the kid's in, which I guess with COVID, we had these weird 6 and 7 year players. And I felt like maybe it got watered down then where they stopped telling you what class they were in because it was kind of hard to figure out how many years of eligibility certain players had left. And, I think, or I hope that that is going to get cleaned up now that we've distanced ourselves from the COVID situation far enough that most of those kids are going to be gone here in the next couple of years. But yeah, I did notice over the last few years, I'd be reading articles. I'm like, what year is this kid in? And then they just like wouldn't mention it. But then sometimes I would start trying to figure it out. And you would realize that you had a Louis Moore at Indiana, or you had a Diego Pavi at Vanderbilt who had lobbied and gotten extra years of eligibility. And I think that that was why it was hard when you were reading the articles to discern all that. Kind of long-winded, but here on Midwest Splits, we get a little long-winded. We want to hear your comments and responses because I know this is the type of thing that other football fans have to be wondering about, right? Why did I read this article about this kid and he's 23 years old, but I don't know what class he's in?
Yeah, it's very confusing for sure.
Can we go to Michigan, Coach Drew, to the big house?
Yeah, let's go to Michigan.
Talk about Kyle Whittingham. So we did mention that Kyle Whittingham had been hired at Michigan, obviously from Utah, which we didn't know that Whittingham was still looking for a coaching job, and maybe he wasn't, maybe he was. I watched part of his press conference, and he said, I wasn't sure that I was going to coach again, but for the right opportunity, I was ready. He's at the big house answering questions. Somebody asked him a question about the expectations of being at Michigan. And they mentioned he was very successful in Utah for over 20 years. He was the defensive coordinator there for 10 years, at least partially under Urban Meyer, who had come there from Bowling Green and obviously started the Tim Tebow dynasty at Florida there for a few years, and then went to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Did great there, did Urban Meyer. Whittingham is somewhat out of the Urban Meyer coaching tree, but not entirely. Guy that knows how to run a winning program. I think that this is a good pickup for Michigan because, A, you're coming out of some scandals and some bullshit that Michigan fans don't want to see. But more than that, stylistically, Michigan is a pound you up front, fist fight culture of football. That is a true Midwestern football culture that Michigan has. Michigan's always been more about run the ball, stop the run, pound you on defense than explosive offense. And that's coming from cold weather states, the SEC, state of Florida, etc., breeds speed. It's not that Michigan has had great defensive backs and great wide receivers, but they start up front, inside out, middle to back. And Whittingham at Utah was the epitome of that. Very like smash mouth style of coach. But what I want to say, Coach Drew, as I talk about Kyle Whittingham is Michigan needs Kyle Whittingham to bring in Jason Beck, his offensive coordinator from Utah this season. They need him in Ann Arbor, and here's why. Because Jason Beck knows how to develop a true dual threat quarterback like Bryce Underwood. So Jason Beck came in from New Mexico, was the head coach at New Mexico, and he had a quarterback named Devin Dampier. Devin Dampier is smaller. He reminds me of my favorite player of all time. Not quite as good, but my favorite player of all time from Indiana was Antoine Randall, who was a dual threat quarterback for Indiana back in the day, ran the option, threw it, ran it, returned punts, punted the ball, kicked field goals, all this stuff. Talking about Antoine Randall. But Jason Beck had Devin Dampier at New Mexico, brought him to Utah this year, improved him as a passer, and continued his improvement as a runner. This was not a situation at Utah this year with Devin Dampier at quarterback under offensive coordinator Jason Beck. where the quarterback just has to run a lot. And then if they stop that, the offense stalls. It was very much take what the defense gives us. And really, that's the best thing in all of offense in any team sport is, can we take what the defense gives us? Jason Beck will take Bryce Underwood to new heights if they bring him there as the offensive coordinator. If you don't believe me, go back and watch 2 years ago, New Mexico football highlights and watch Devin Dampier, and then watch him at Utah this year and see how much he improved as a passer. And I love watching Devin Dampier. He's a fun athlete, great athlete, can throw it. But Devin Dampier is not 6'4", 220 with a cannon for an arm like Underwood is, and runs just as fast. Probably not quite as shifty, but if you really want to utilize Bryce Underwood and make him what he's capable of being, you need to give him the option to run and throw. And I thought early in the season, Michigan was building towards that, but I mean, it was obvious as the season went along that they really weren't. I felt like Underwood was kind of handcuffed. I thought in the game that they played against Northwestern, where Michigan fans were very disappointed, I thought that Underwood threw some great balls, but I don't think the scheme and the lack of wide receiver talent that Michigan had, I don't think that really helped Underwood as the season went along. So they need Jason Beck as the offensive coordinator at Michigan. That will be the best thing for Bryce Underwood, and I think Whittingham knows that. I'm calling my shot, Coach Drew. They're going to pay Jason Beck what they need to pay him to get him there. Why would Jason Beck stay in Utah when Kyle Whittingham hired him at Utah and he was there for 1 year? Then he has a chance to go in with a talent like Bryce Underwood. Why would you stay at Utah? No offense to Utah. I think Utah is similar to Iowa in the Big Ten, where people don't respect it. Utah has been a great program in the Big 12 for a long time. They just have not been a championship level program. But sometimes that's where you get the best coaches from, where they're striving out of a program that doesn't have like the most elite top flight talent, Coach Drew.
Yeah, I think that was well said about the Michigan situation. I mean, we're gonna see. I mean, some people, I think somebody said that Bryce Underwood said he's staying. I mean, it's still up in the air. I did post a TikTok about it and somebody said it on there. But yeah, it's one of those things where we're tracking, and then Marcus Freeman also signed his extension. Some coaches at Clemson also got fired. So we're starting to see the ripple effects of this season and how it goes there. I mean, me and you have both shared the Joe Klatt prediction, I believe it was, right? That was the quarterback prediction of who's going to be good. And like maybe nobody on there was like even like damn near where they needed to be. I mean, this quarterback class is so questionable because a lot of the quarterbacks, quote unquote, that we wanted to see do well this year, again, air quotes, because we do have biases here. You look at it now, those quarterbacks aren't even the top of the draft board. It's all upside down, left, right. I mean, and plus, like we're talking about, like situation with Philip Rivers coming back for the Colts for the temporary big, huge bandage, the gauze, whatever you want to call him. He came in and tried to do his best, but I mean, they just don't develop quarterbacks like they do anymore. And some of these quarterbacks struggled at the collegiate level. Wait till they see something at the NFL level. It's going to be interesting to see the next couple of years of how this all breaks down.
Can we hit the Philip Rivers thing, Coach Drew, that we talked about? So the question has been, if you guys are following us here on the Midwest Blitz, the Colts have had quarterback injuries and poor quarterback drafting strategy with Anthony Richardson. But regardless of that, he was hurt. Danny Dimes got hurt for the Colts this year also. So they've got to go into the cupboard. They had practice squad quarterback Riley Leonard. They didn't feel comfortable starting him after he got some action when Danny Dimes got hurt. So the question, I think, Coach Drew, is Philip Rivers, I'm going to use air quotes, success, questions in a quarterback development coming out of college into the pros and in the pros. So playing quarterback is more mental than physical, especially in the National Football League. If you don't have the physical ability to play quarterback, you're not getting in the league. Okay. So as late great Indiana basketball coach Bobby Knight used to say when I was at basketball camp when I was a kid, the mental is to the physical as 2 is to 1. Now, if you're bad at math like me, that was hard to understand when old Bobby was telling me that, but Coach Drew's good at math, so he understands that Bobby Knight was saying, and this applies to NFL quarterback as much as anything. If you can't read a defense, if you can't read a pass protection, if you can't communicate with your center, if you can't see all these things, you can't play at all. And this is why I said Richardson was a bad pick for the Colts. So I hope I haven't lost you with all this Colts talk. The reason that Rivers is able to come in, Coach Drew, and have a limited amount of success, Rivers isn't setting the world on fire, but he can hit checkdowns, read hot routes, and things of that nature with a great running back, and Jonathan Taylor, by the way, is that the quarterback position is more mental than anything. If somebody wanted to pay Phillip Rivers to sit around and almost win a game for the next 5 years and pay him top flight money, Phillip Rivers would stick around and do it. The reason Phillip Rivers was not playing football anymore is that he physically cannot beat you anymore. So the Colts, out of desperation, went to the smartest quarterback that they know who was still physically willing and able to play. So Rivers hitting checkdowns and all this does not imply that a 45-year-old should be playing quarterback in the NFL. What it should do for you if you want to learn something about football is help you understand that he knows the right thing to do, but he can't beat you over the top with his arm anymore, which is sad. Phillip Rivers used to throw 60-yard darts, man. He used to fuck the Colts up. I watched it in the playoffs a couple times. Rivers can still contribute because the mind is willing, but he can't win the game for you because the body is not able. Again, not a shot at Phillip Rivers, but that's back to what you said, Coach Drew. We're drafting guys out of college who can't manage a game in college. Being a game manager is used as a derisive term, I feel like. Dude, if you can't manage the game, you can't win in the NFL. You just can't. It doesn't matter how strong your arm is. It doesn't matter how strong your legs are, how fast you run. You have to be able to manage the game, manage the clock, hit checkdowns. Dude, Tom Brady was a check down specialist his first couple of years in New England. He wasn't hitting guys over the top for all these deep touchdowns, but he knew where to put the ball and keep it out of harm's way. And then eventually he grew into the GOAT that we know now. But yeah, living in Indianapolis, this Indianapolis Colts fans are the least knowledgeable football fans I think I've ever met. Phillip Rivers did great. Well, yeah, he did great for an old man. It's not that Phillip Rivers is great. It's he knows how to play the game. And if you go watch they do a pro-am here in Indianapolis in the summer, and you see some ex-NBA players and some ex-college basketball players. Some of the old fuckers will show up in this pro-am, and they'll mess you up if you're not ready for them. Just because they know how to play the game. It's not because their legs are still what they used to be or whatever. I don't know. Coach Drew, that makes sense. That sounds like a good conclusion to a Midwest goodbye.
That was probably the best Midwest goodbye we've had in a while with actually analytics. We usually just have fun here, but there's a lot of stuff that had to be said, but we didn't want to bore you because we wanted to make sure you got everything covered for the preview. So, I mean, we're going to break this up. There's going to be chapters. I'm going to release 4 different separate episodes. You guys are going to love it. Well,
dude, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everybody. Hope you had a great Christmas, and we look forward to seeing you filthy animals, in the college football playoff semifinal preview, Coach Drew. All right.